Hello, and welcome to the National Jewish Community Celebration of Veterans Day, hosted by JWB Jewish Chaplains Council, a signature program of the JCC Association of North America. I am Gary Jacobs, chair of the association's Continental Board of Directors. Today, we officially celebrate Veterans Day across the United States, a day in which we seek out and thank those members of the community who have fought and served to protect the freedoms and rights that Jews and all who live across North America take for granted. In honor of these great military personnel and their commitment to service, we wanted to share with you a few of their extraordinary stories of courage, commitment, and duty to country. We will showcase veterans from every generation, from the greatest called to serve during world wars, through to our most recent veterans, a digital generation who are not obliged to serve, but rather choose to serve. Please join me in honoring them and their stories of service.
Hello, I'm Rabbi Irv Elson, a retired naval officer and a proud Jewish veteran. Throughout my service and in my current role as director of the JWB Jewish Chaplains Council, I am proud to uphold a long tradition of American Jews who have heeded the call to serve and have done so throughout our country's history. Beginning with the War of Independence, the Civil War, World Wars I and II, the conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and the current conflicts in the Middle East, Jews have always been proud, leading members of every branch of our armed forces. Some, even before our country had its military of its own, were already serving in uniform. American Jews like Asher Levy, who fought for the right to bear arms in defense of his community in 17th century New Amsterdam. Jews like Francis Salvador, who was the first one to die for the American independence, and my personal hero, Commodore Uriah P. Levy, who served in our Navy during the War of 1812. In World War I and II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, and Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, Jews have continued to serve in every branch of the military, some making the ultimate sacrifice for our country. As we speak, more than 10,000 Jews are serving in uniform on active duty in our military. They, together with the families corresponding to another 15,000 individuals, serve our country here and overseas. As a combat veteran myself, I know the sacrifices Jews have made and continue to make as members of the U.S. military. So today, we celebrate and honor every veteran, every man and woman across our country who at one time or another chose country over self and chose to wear the cloth of our nation. The courage of these extraordinary men and women ensure the freedom that we honor today. Thank you.
Were you drafted or did you volunteer?
Drafted.
I was drafted, and I wasn't even a citizen.
I was drafted.
We had to pay our dues as Jews and as Americans.
You know, growing up, my parents' generation, everybody had served. And it just kind of, their stories were compelling. I mean, you know, they all really had interesting stories to tell about World War II.
I joined the Air Force and I had a master's degree in social work. I turned down an officer's commission in the Army to go into the Air Force. My dad wasn't too happy because he was a colonel in the Army, but I wanted to take a challenge.
Top Gun came out in 1986, and that was it for me.
When I was about 16, a movie came out called Women at West Point. And in this movie, it was about a woman, obviously, who went to West Point, and that gave me some ideas about, just kind of put a seed in my head.
Many people told me that, you know, I didn't need to. You just go to college, do whatever you want. But I don't know, something in me said that if you can, you probably should.
As a rabbinical student, I saw a recruiting poster that caught my eye, and I thought it would be an interesting way to explore and develop that interest that I had had as a young person.
The Navy had a cool job. It was either be an amphibious vehicle crewman or a rescue swimmer. And growing up surfing, I knew I could swim, so I said I want to be a rescue swimmer.
I graduated from high school in Queens on a Friday and then raised my right hand up after a weekend off on a Monday at the Coast Guard to get to the Coast Guard. And to show my allegiance to the Constitution.
At that time, I wanted to do something that was extraordinary and different and maybe difficult.
Many people who met me told me they had never met a Jew before. Maybe they had seen someone Jewish on television, but they met me.
It's nice to just be that good Jewish person. That's the first person they've ever met that was Jewish.
I started to identify more as a Jew in boot camp, because Friday nights we could get out of things, because Friday nights we could get away from the division and go to Jewish services and eat some candy every now and then, while everybody else had to, getting beat down Friday nights. So that was the biggest part for me. I was like, wow, I'm really lucky to be a Jew right now. So I'm going to go to services. That's where it started for me. And then later on, when I was on my first ship, it made a really big impact on me.
It was strange for me because I knew more Jewish people at the Air Force Academy than I knew in any of the places where I grew up. It was really my first experience celebrating these holidays with a bunch of people my age.
The only officer, I made sure that my enlisted men of the Jewish faith had time off for the Jewish holidays.
Got together in a camp from all over Korea came the Jewish soldiers. In fact, I wrote an article about it for the newspaper. And the general, I think it was General Taylor, who was commanding officer, he was with us for a Seder. And for high holidays, we also got together.
You walk into this Jewish chapel, which was, fairly small, but there were only 4 of us in all of the recruit depot. And he was just the nicest man. He told us, I understand I'm a captain in the Navy. I need you to speak to me like I'm your rabbi. You need to be able to talk to me. And he had some older folks with him that were Jewish as well that wanted to be at services with the Marines and help us through things and talk us through. And it was nice. I still remember Sheila to this day. She was one of the nicest women I've ever met. And she used to bake us cookies and hide them in her purse because obviously we weren't allowed to have cookies in boot camp.
The people mostly were in the Mekong Delta itself, and it wasn't just Navy, it could have been somewhere, but it was all thanks to this Christian Navy chaplain, this Episcopal priest. Les Westling was his name. People came to the service because it was the only thing Jewish for so many of them, and we didn't do anything for Rosh Hashanah, but for Yom Kippur, it just felt to this chaplain that was worth the effort, because it took an effort for the Navy to helicopter people in or to put them on boats to go from the ship to a boat to the island. So it was a major effort, and it was symbolic. Even the people who couldn't come, I think it made them feel good that it was happening.
The idea that a rabbi would schlep to Iraq and then find them in some far-flung little forward operating base to have a Passover Seder. I had Seders with as few as two people. My biggest one was probably over 40 in Baghdad at Camp Victory. And they're just tremendously, tremendously appreciative of the opportunity to be together. And very often, the individuals seated around the table, whether it was for Passover or whether it was for Hanukkah, assumed that they were the only Jew within hundreds of miles. So to discover those connections was incredibly meaningful for the participants. And I like to think that I planted the little seed of a community that once those people had found each other, they could continue to stay connected and bring some kind of Jewish life to their far-flung corner of the world. The other thing that's beautiful about the connection of Jewish tradition and observance is that it transcends the barriers of rank. And the Army is a very rank-structured organization, and yet sitting around the Passover table, you have a sergeant sitting next to a major, and they are on an equal footing because they're singing Dayenu together, they're remembering the Passovers that they celebrated with family, And the fact that that connection transcends the rank was always a very beautiful thing to me.
From an enlisted man becoming an officer.
I took that whole company home from Desert Storm. I did not have a casualty.
I've got to meet presidents. I've got to meet kings and queens and princes. I've traveled all over the world. I've seen things that in never in my life did I ever think that I was ever going to see.
I was able to earn my gold jump wings. So very few Marines get to wear these, and very few women get to wear them at all.
One of my many career highlights was the opportunity to meet with President George W. Bush in the White House. And while we were meeting together, I gave him a copy of the prayer book. And I saw him later that evening at the White House Hanukkah ball, and he mentioned that he was looking forward to reviewing it.
My proudest moment was when I got these babies. These aircrew wings. Took a lot of training and hard work and check rides, and I had to go to survival school, and I didn't go through the traditional way of getting these because I was a photographer. So I had to go straight to my squadron and do everything the hard way. And then my division officer one day came in and said, "You qualified." They called everybody together and they pinned these on my chest. And it's amazing when you're enlisted to have gold wings on your chest.
One of the proudest things I've done is a number of very proud things, but I was one of the small group of Vietnam veterans who fought for the establishment of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington. The first time I led a prayer was the groundbreaking, at where the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was going to be. There were between 50 and 100 people. When we did the actual dedication, there were over 100,000 people. And after that service, despite this giant crowd, I was amazed at how many Jews came up to me, Vietnam veterans in those crowds, to tell me they were so proud that a rabbi who had served in Vietnam, and of course I was chosen for the prayer because I was in Vietnam before I was a rabbi, but by the time of the dedication in 1982, I was a chaplain, so it was perfect. And they came up to me to say, the country just doesn't know that we Jews served in Vietnam as we've served in all the wars. So they were proud that my prayer was a reminder to everyone.
A lot of people don't understand about the military. It's not all combat. A lot of it's humanitarian assistance. There's a lot of other missions that the military does. The combat, the things blowing up, that's what makes the movies. But there's a lot of other things we do. A specific event that really had an impact on me was about 10 years ago, a little under 10 years ago. It was a massive earthquake and tsunami in the Pacific. Tsunami hits Japan. We start to have a nuclear reactor that's melting down as a result of damage from the tsunami. And we all come together kind of as a cohesive unit across the entire theater to try to help the Japanese address this problem. So kind of seeing all of that gel was maybe kind of a pinnacle event for me as an older guy at that point in the service, watching it all come together.
It gave me an appreciation for Judaism that I really didn't have growing up. I didn't feel that close to my parents' synagogue. And I don't think I would be close now if it wasn't for the military bringing me back.
I went to college under the GI Bill of Rights. We may have heard of it.
I recommend that every Jewish person does something in serving the country, whether it be the youth corps or whatever, or whatever. And I recommend the military because what the military does, and I was halfway there because of my Boy Scout stuff, is it gets you structured really well. It's very helpful. And yeah, it's dangerous. Okay. Almost everything I ever did was in harm's way, one way or the other. But here I am.
Nobody prays for peace with greater passion than soldiers. And yet, going to war is what we are trained to do. And I think everyone wants to do what they are trained to do. So it's this kind of dilemma of, it's not that we're bloodthirsty and want to go to war, but we want to be able to take our training and put it into practice. So when there is an opportunity to deploy, it's very meaningful.
Juno in Judaism, remembering someone keeps them alive. You say, I remember them for a blessing. So when I was in Beirut, a lot of people after the explosion were feeling guilty. There's something called survivor's guilt, where if you survive, you feel very guilty that somehow you should have died too, you let others down. And so I would teach them from the Jewish perspective, now it's your commandment to remember them, your commandment to live in the way they would have wanted the world to be. So that's how I cope. I remember, and I think that I'm living for these other people in certain ways. Speaking of Jewish sayings, there's the old saying that comes from the story of Moses, who saw an Israelite being beaten by an Egyptian. He looks around, and the Bible says, and he didn't see any other man, so he stepped in and stopped the beating. So from that we get the old expression, where there is no man, you be the man. And I once had a friend, a Jewish poet, who translated it in a much better way, which is, where there is no humanity, you be humanity. So I would tell these sailors or these officers, you may not be able to decide what war we get into, but there will be times when you're going to be the human being. You're going to be the humanity in your unit, on your ship, and that's going to change everything.
It takes all of you. You don't get to just flip a switch and stop being Sergeant Whitmire for the day. Every ounce of you, all the time, is in that job. You take breaks, you can go hang out with friends, but you're never stopped being a Marine. Even now, I catch myself doing things, watching people, making sure things are safe, checking. It never stops, and it sticks with you. You're never done. It takes every ounce of who you are to do this.
If you've never heard of any Jew serving in the military, please don't say, wow, I've never heard of a Jew serving in the military. That really bothered me. It's so unfortunate because there's so many Jews in the military, so many. And so just ask them what their story is. If there's a Jewish person that just got home, ask them what their story is. Sit down and really listen to them, engage with them. And embrace them. That's the biggest thing, is listening to their stories.
It's kind of a lonely existence when you're serving in the military, because we don't have these great metropolitan communities where there's like you have in New York, you have in Chicago or in LA, or in some of the major cities like Dallas. You go into these military towns and it's really kind of small when it comes to how many people are in if you're lucky if you get a minion.
We have to really find ways to attract younger people, attract Jewish families, to strengthen their Judaism and so they don't feel alone if they're in an area where there aren't many Jews, that they feel there's some strength and there are other people in the same situation. So I think that's important.
Many people who met me told me they had never met a Jew before. Maybe they had seen someone Jewish on television, but they met me. And I think it's just important for all of us to understand that Jews are part of the fabric of America in the good times, but also the hard times.
There are children whose parents are serving in the military, and to make sure that they are recognized and acknowledged, and that the community appreciates the sacrifice that families make when their loved one serves our country.
I had a Marine, I was leading services in Iraq, and he came to me, and this may not be the right thing to do, but it's what I chose to do. And he said, "Ma'am, I've never been a religious man, but my best friend got shot and died. But I know I have to say Kaddish." I didn't have a minyan, but by golly, those people that were there, we went around this Marine and we all said Kaddish with him for his best friend that died in an action that happened like 2 weeks before. He couldn't begin the healing process without that. I never saw him again. It was a challenge for him to go from where he was stationed in a forward operating base to where we were in Baghdad, but he found us.
Hello, I'm Rabbi Tracy Kaplowitz, Director of Operations for JWB Jewish Chaplains Council. I hope every story you've heard today has touched your heart and expanded your understanding of the deep commitments these Jewish veterans have made in service to our country. Each one is an example of heroism and patriotism, and I believe their duty makes them the shining stars of our Jewish community. I'd like to take a moment and share my story with you. For 9 years, I served as the chaplain in the United States Air Force Reserve. And there was no greater pride that I felt than when I put on this uniform, the uniform of our country. But in reality, there are two uniforms that I wear. One was the uniform of our military as an officer, and the other is the uniform of Jewish life, which for me includes my talit, that I wear when I pray and when I lead services as a rabbi. In each role, I've learned that Jewish community and military service are not always compatible for our veterans. These two identities, being Jewish and being in service, can at times be a difficult and conflicting burden. When in uniform, and especially when returning to civilian life, their needs need to be met by our community. But there's still a long road to travel before every Jewish veteran finds a home in the Jewish community, which is precisely why I am asking you to transform today's celebration of Jewish veterans into one of action. With the leaders of your community, the power is in your hands to ensure that all Jewish veterans feel the warm embrace of Jewish community. A welcome they most definitely deserve.
Hi, I'm Doron Krakow, President and CEO of JCC Association of North America. JWB Jewish Chaplains Council is a signature program of the JCC movement about which we are incredibly proud. We hope that through the remarkable stories you've seen and heard from our diverse veterans, whose commitment to service is unparalleled, you will be inspired to reach out to your local U.S. Jewish servicemen and women this Veterans Day and every day, to acknowledge them for having put their lives on the line to safeguard our freedoms. Thank you for taking the time today to celebrate our Jewish American veterans. On behalf of JCC Association of North America and JWB Jewish Chaplains Council, I hope you will consider supporting Jewish life across the continent and wherever Jews serve their country.